Good afternoon. It's Friday, the 6th of March. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. Terror once again hit the streets of the capital this morning in an attack that wounded 5 people, including 4 border police women. 2 of the victims are in moderate condition, and the 3 others suffered light injuries in what police are calling another vehicular terror attack. A bicyclist was reportedly hit by the assailant, who has been identified as Mohammed Mahmoud al-Salema, before he then rammed his car into a group of pedestrians near a light rail station on Shimon HaTzadik Street near Highway 1. A railway security guard and a border police officer shot and seriously wounded al-Salemi, who is a resident of the East Jerusalem neighborhood of Ras Al Amud, bringing his bloody rampage to an end. The victims were rushed to the Sharet Tzedek and Hadassah hospitals in the capital for medical treatment. This morning's attack occurred close to the site of a similar vehicular terror attack on the 5th of November, almost exactly 4 months ago, when a border policeman was killed and 13 people were injured. The Hamas rulers of Gaza are praising this latest attack as a fitting response to crimes by Israel. A short time ago, IBA's Margot Dukevich spoke with police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld about this morning's attack.
Took place this morning in Jerusalem is in his vehicle and struck 4 border police women that were in fact outside the number 1 road, which is in fact the same area where there was a terrorist attack approximately 4 months ago. Police units that were in the scene and arrived quickly responded. The vehicle continued approximately 150 meters where it was stopped, and the suspect attempted to come out of the vehicle with a knife and stabbed a border policeman, attempted to stab a border policeman and a private security guard, who opened fire and shot the suspect. At the moment, what we've confirmed is that 5 people altogether were taken to Jerusalem hospitals injured, 4 of them border police women, and the suspect himself, who was shot. Since the attack, we've heightened security in Jerusalem, in spite of taking into consideration the Purim celebrations in Jerusalem throughout the day.
Were there any warnings of terrorists intending to launch attacks over Purim?
No, there were no specific warnings that we received about any terrorist attack that would take place in Jerusalem. There was regular security that was taking place with emphasis on public places, bus stops and train stations, but there was no clear indication that there was going to be a terrorist attack in Jerusalem this morning.
What can you tell us about the terrorist himself? There are reports that he's from the neighborhood of Ras Al Amud.
The investigation is continuing. Both the border police, the Israeli police, and the internal security are involved with that. We're still continuing to find the exact location where he was from and how he came into Jerusalem. That's still continuing as we're talking right now.
The Palestinian leadership has announced that all joint security cooperation with Israel will be halted in response to the government decision to continue withholding the monthly transfer of millions of dollars in tax revenue to the Palestinian Authority. The move was taken during a 2-day meeting of the Palestine Central Council that concluded in Ramallah yesterday. According to a statement issued by the council members, all security arrangements with the occupying power in all of its forms will stop, and the PA will assume full responsibility for the Palestinian people in the occupied state of Palestine, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Unnamed Palestinian officials say that for the directive to be implemented, a presidential decree would have to be issued by Mahmoud Abbas. Speaking to Israel Radio this morning, Israeli officials said that they are unaware of any change in the situation and that both security and civil cooperation are so far continuing unimpeded. Turning now to campaign matters, and a Likud ad has sparked outrage from the head of the Histadrut Labor Federation, the Ashdod Port Union Committee, politicians and personnel here at the Israel Broadcast Authority. The clip depicts a meeting of a support group in which an IBA clerk, dock worker, and a cellular company executive are among those complaining that the reforms enacted by the Netanyahu government prevented them from being paid for not doing anything. Then a Hamas terrorist in a circle laments that he too has been put out of business by Netanyahu. After the video was hammered for being insulting and insensitive, the Likud election headquarters offered an apology and claimed that it was meant to illustrate the government's achievements in a humorous fashion in light of the Purim holiday. Party officials claim to have removed the online video last night, although it continued to be broadcast several times on a number of television channels. Over the past 24 hours, a number of polls indicate that Likud is still vying for the top spot with the Zionist Union faction, with just 11 days to go until the election for the 20th Knesset. A Channel 1 survey finds that both parties would each receive 24 mandates, followed by Yesh Atid in third place with 13. The United Arab List would garner 12 seats, followed by Habayit UD with 11. With 7 seats, Kulanu is shown to have fallen below the Shas party for the first time, which netted 8. United Torah Judaism also received 7, followed by Israel Beitenu with 6, while Meretz and Yachad came in with just 4 seats each. Another poll by the Jerusalem Post determined that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to the U.S. Congress hasn't helped his Likud party to diminish the Zionist Union's 2-seat lead of 24 to 22. According to an Israel Hayom survey, both the Likud and the Zionist Union would receive 23 mandates. Habayit UD would get 11 and Yachad 5. Walla is also predicting a tight race between the top 2 factions, each of which would garner 24 seats, while Yesh Atid and the United Arab List would take 12 each. Professor Avram Diskin of the Hebrew University told IBA's Ari O'Sullivan that while he expects the Prime Minister to win the election again, he believes that Netanyahu will encounter difficulty in forming a right-wing government.
He once and again declares that he is interested to have in his coalition the ultra-Orthodox parties, the Jewish Home headed by Bennett, Lieberman and Kahlon. He mentioned them, one by one. So he's going this time, according to his declarations, on a right-wing government. Maybe he is doing so because of electoral considerations. Maybe he's doing so because the rift, I think, between the two camps is too large. There are personal gaps, problems with Yair Lapid of Yesh Atid. Having him and the ultra-Orthodox parties in the same coalition is very difficult. Now they are not interested. In the past he was not interested. So maybe he's pushed to that position, and there is a very good chance that if he does form the government, we'll have a right-wing coalition with the most centrist Moshe Kahlon and his new party.
Have the corruption scandals surrounding the Prime Minister going to have any impact? Has he been successful in portraying himself as the victim?
I think that, we're talking about really nonsense issues. And right now we had official reports, the last one by the Attorney General that says, well, Netanyahu himself has nothing to do with all that. I think that it was a mistake from the point of view of the left-wing parties to focus on that. It does convince people who are already convinced, people who are already against Netanyahu, don't like him personally, have all kinds of criticism against his wife. It does convince them, but the fight is over the floating voters, those who hesitate between the camps, and it's not really, I really think that most of these issues are nonsense issues. After all, there are such huge economic problems, social problems, and existential problems. So to deal with who took the money for the empty bottles really looks quite inefficient and not very smart.
If you could be a prophet, how can you call these elections? Who's going to win?
Right now, according to all the data that we have now, I think that most chances are that Netanyahu will continue to be the Prime Minister. It's not definite. I would say that maybe there are up to 20% chances that we are going to have an upheaval. But, in Israel you cannot know. And as I said before, a small shift, 5% move from one side to the other. Okay, you have a whole different map, but I would say it definitely looks as if Netanyahu is going to be the Prime Minister, and definitely looks as if he's going to have quite some period of tough negotiations, dependence on small parties. if that does happen, it's not going to be an easy life for him as prime minister. It's going to be even more difficult for Bougie Herzog if he wins. And as I said, there is some small chance that that will happen after all.
Joining me now here in the studio to discuss the latest political and diplomatic events is senior correspondent for Bloomberg Israel, Kalev Ben-David. Hi, Kalev. Thanks for coming in.
Pleasure to be here as always, Aaron.
Thank you. All right, let's start with that controversial Netanyahu address to Congress. It took place just as it was slated. Are we seeing any signs of payback from an angry Obama administration?
Well, we are certainly seeing some pretty sharp comments from President Obama and Secretary Kerry, both right before and after the speech. I'm bringing up, for example, Netanyahu's support of the Iraq war vote that they had opposed in Congress. However, in terms of blowback, I think the Obama administration should be a little careful, especially before the election takes place, to do anything overt other than language, because that could be seen as interfering in the Israeli election, and that could actually then work against them. I mean, they could bring sympathy to Netanyahu. Afterwards, we'll have to see, for example, Israel has recently asked for more defense funding from the U.S. For some of its missile programs, if there'll be any pushback from the Obama administration on that and on some other areas. We might see some, and maybe some embarrassing leaks from the Obama administration on Netanyahu, but we'll have to wait until after the election.
Well, now let's talk about the speech itself. What do you say to those who claim that Netanyahu didn't say anything new about Iran that wasn't already known?
You know, Prime Minister Netanyahu was in a very tricky position because there was some people in his circle beforehand which was saying that he was going to maybe discuss aspects of the treaty which weren't made public.
I think they were all holding their breath about that.
There was blowback from that, and basically warning Netanyahu not to go over that line and to reveal things which are confidential in the treaty room, in the negotiating room. He made a point of saying he was going to say things you could find on Google. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous to think the Prime Minister of Israel has no better intelligence than Google. We know he does. So he couldn't really reveal much that was new. However, you have to remember who his audience here was. The Israeli public has heard this speech from Netanyahu many times. I mean, journalists like us, I must have heard it about 50 times just in the past year. These exact same points. But for most of the American public, including some of those congressmen who don't follow the issue so closely, there was, I think, some new type of material, or at least the presentation was new. I spoke to even some U.S. journalists that don't follow Israel-Iran so closely, and they, were impressed with the speech. I mean, that was his public there. So I think he did make an impression. The only problem is, of course, at the end of the day, foreign policy is decided in the White House, and it doesn't look like he certainly convinced any minds there.
Okay, and what about back here? What kind of reverberations is it having? As you well know, all the polls are showing Likud pretty much in a very tight race with the Zionist Union, or the Zionist Union may be slightly ahead. Is that speech likely to have any further impact here with just 11 days to go to the election?
Well, some of the pollsters are saying that even though the polls are quite similar to what they were before the speech, that perhaps Netanyahu stemmed a slight decline that the Likud was having. It means it certainly didn't lose any more seats, and in some of the polls it went up maybe 1 or 2 seats, nothing truly significant. Will it have any more further? No, I don't think so. The fact is, even though we in the media rightly made a big deal about this, and relations with the U.S. are critical, this was not a huge issue for the general public. I'm not talking about Iran itself, because there's a consensus on Iran, but about his speech. For example, it really didn't come up in the debate that we saw the previous week, where you had the 8 candidates, not Netanyahu or Herzog. It really wasn't even mentioned. So that really hasn't been such a big issue here, and certainly I don't think going forward, I don't think it will have much reverberation. I would guess the polls we're seeing now, I would guess more or less are going to be what we're going to have.
All right, we're just about out of time, but I'd like to ask you, you were here, you just saw that clip that compared people like me who work for IBA to a Hamas terrorist, which I don't even have to tell you how I would react to that, but what are you making of most of the campaign clips so far?
I think what's really striking in this, but beyond that clip, is the attempts at humor that we're seeing. Prime Minister Netanyahu playing a babysitter. I mean, acting out a comic thing. Naftali Bennett putting on a beard and doing a Saturday Night Live skit. The Meretz candidates dancing away in a fake wedding video. Really striking. What we're really seeing here is the first election in which the internet clips, trying to make a funny internet web clip that will go viral is much more important than those television ads, which are all grouped together conveniently in the evening in one time so we can all ignore them without having to see them. So Israeli politics, this election, we've truly entered the internet web age. And I don't know, it's good last, but do you really want to see your prime minister or the other candidates basically doing Saturday Night Live skits? Maybe it's a little too much.
Maybe. Well, Kalev, always good to hear what you think. Thank you for coming in, as always.
A pleasure. Purim Sameach to you. Those clips are certainly in the spirit of Purim, and to all the viewers.
Thanks, Kalev. In other news, a Haifa court today extended the remand by 3 days of a 31-year-old man caught impersonating a doctor at the city's Rambam and Carmel hospitals. The Galilee resident was arrested yesterday by security guards who handed him over to police. Officials at Rambam say that they received a tip about the suspect's presence earlier this week, and that security personnel were instructed to be on the lookout for him. The hospital's Director General, Raphael Bayar, told reporters that even though the suspect was posing as a medical intern and wouldn't have been involved in surgical procedures, officials are still trying to ascertain which wards he may have accessed and whether or not he was involved in the treatment of patients. Bayar characterized the incident as serious and vowed to bolster security procedures throughout the medical facility. The suspect has reportedly claimed to have failed completing medical studies abroad, telling police that it has always been his dream to become a physician. The Army Central Command has temporarily suspended the use of the K-9 unit in the West Bank following the publishing of a video clip by the B'Tselem rights group showing a group of soldiers setting an attack dog on a teenage Palestinian stone thrower in December. Following an investigation, Judea and Samaria Commander Brigadier General Tamir Yadai described the incident as grave and said that the soldiers involved will face disciplinary action for actions demonstrating a low professional standard and unbecoming moral behavior. During an operation to detain a group of Palestinian stone throwers near the Gush Etzion settlement of Karmei Tzur on December 23rd, soldiers unleashed a dog and then stood by laughing and chastising the teenager as the dog was latched onto him. The video footage of the incident only came to light after former right-wing Knesset member Michael Ben-Ari uploaded onto his Facebook page last week. The United Nations Security Council is preparing to condemn the use of any toxic chemicals, including chlorine, in Syria by voting on a U.S. drafted resolution today that threatens to take action if such arms are again used during this conflict. Diplomats speaking on condition of anonymity say that it remains uncertain how Syria's ally Russia will vote, but this month's UNSC President and French UN Ambassador François Delattre expressed his hopes that the bill will be adopted unanimously. The United States, United Kingdom and France have accused the regime of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad of using chemical weapons following the discovery of evidence by inspectors for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons indicating the systematic and repeated use of chlorine gas in the Arab Republic. Assad agreed to destroy his chemical arsenal in 2013, and although chlorine is not a prohibited substance, its use as a chemical weapon was banned as part of the Chemical Weapons Convention 2 years ago, to which Damascus is a signatory. And some of the world's greatest archaeological and cultural treasures are being destroyed by Islamic State fighters in Iraq. According to government officials in Baghdad, ISIS extremists have looted and bulldozed the ancient Assyrian city of Nimrud near modern-day Mosul, which they seized control of, along with much of the country's northern sector last June. The latest destruction of ancient relics comes just a week after the forces were seen demolishing museum statues and carvings in the area. The radical fighters dismiss all pre-Islamic heritage or that belongs to any other sect other than Sunni Islam as idolatrous and have been pillaging the 3,000-year-old site on the banks of the Tigris River. In other regional news, the al-Qaeda branch in Syria, known as the Nusra Front, has confirmed that its top military commander, Abu Humam al-Shami, was killed in an airstrike along with 3 other military leaders. The state Sana news agency is reporting that al-Shami, with a number of other al-Nusra commanders, were meeting at a village in the Idlib region when they were killed. Others are reporting that they were killed in an explosion caused by a coalition airstrike, although coalition officials are denying any operations have been conducted in the area since Wednesday. Al-Shami is the most senior Nusra Front official to have been killed since it formed in 2012. The ex-wife of Argentina's late prosecutor, Alberto Nisman, has announced that experts have determined that he was murdered. Sandra Arroyo Salgado said that the independent forensic examination of his body proves that he was the victim of homicide and did not commit suicide. Nisman was found with a bullet to the head on January 18th, less than 24 hours before he was due to testify before Congress that President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner was conspiring to absolve Iran of involvement in the 1994 terrorist bombing of the Buenos Aires Jewish Community Center. Nisman's ex-wife, a federal judge, hired her own forensic team, who say that photos of the crime scene and the autopsy prove that Nisman's body was moved after he was killed, and that there had been no spasms in his right hand, which there would have been had he shot himself. These results reportedly differ from details that have been made public so far by the prosecutor's office, based on the official autopsy, which has yet to be released. Here at home, in celebration of the Purim holiday, continued today with street parties and parades. Police in Tel Aviv warned the public to expect traffic jams and sealed off a number of major roads in anticipation of the thousands of costumed revelers. Here in Jerusalem, the blue skies and warm weather added to the holiday mood, where hundreds gathered in the city streets dressed in a colorful array of disguises. While there were great numbers of spontaneous outdoor celebrations, organizers of a planned street party in the capital's Nachlaot neighborhood were shut down by police today for having failed to secure proper permits for the event. Nevertheless, most people had a great time this Purim, as we see in this selection of images filmed in Hebron and Cholon. The IBA weather team tells us that we can expect another beautiful day tomorrow with unseasonably warm temperatures and dry conditions. Here's the forecast home and abroad for the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. R.A. O'Sullivan will be at this desk tomorrow to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a wonderful evening, a very happy Purim, and Shabbat Shalom from Jerusalem.